Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing, a Magic the Gathering podcast where we talk cube and other magical goodness. I'm your host Dan, better known on the internet as 2SweetMTG, and as always I'm joined by my co-host James. How's it going, dude?
Yeah, it's going pretty good. We've got some sweet new magic cards to talk about.
Yeah, another recording, another new set coming out. Today we're going to be doing our big cube set review for the Fallout Universes Beyond set. There's a ton of cool cards for us to go through. Time codes will be down in the description below if you want to jump around. First up, it's been a little while, but let's do a little catch up with some news. So probably the biggest news from the last couple of weeks is that we've had a banned and restricted announcement, and we've actually had some kind of interesting bans. Most formats have stayed the same. Let's start with Modern, where Violent Outburst is banned. So for those who don't know what that is, Violent Outburst is a red and a green for an instant, that'll be important, that says Cascade, and creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So, James, you probably the better of the two of us to talk about the Modern format. Why was Violent Outburst banned, and what do you think about its banning?
It's a pretty reasonable banning, probably not like a game changer for the format, but I think probably a move in the right direction. So this obviously hits Cascade decks. The two primary decks it's hitting is Team of Rhinos, which is obviously looking to cascade into Crashing Footfalls and make 2 4/4s for 3 mana. And, of course, Living End, which plays a lot of cyclers and then returns them from graveyard by cascading into Living End. The big thing about Violent Outburst is it's the only 3-mana instant it's the only 3-mana cascade spell that's an instant. And that gives the cascade decks a lot more options sort of tactically in how they're playing out the game. The really big thing, I think, with the instant speed, which got pumped with Modern Horizons 2, is Force of Negation. So Force of Negation, you can only cast it for free on your opponent's turn, and having the instant speed cascade available let you go in their end of turn 3, play my cascade spell and have Force of Negation up to protect it. That's no longer an option that's available. You can't protect with Force of Negation on your turn. So I think probably the biggest thing this does is makes the cascade decks more vulnerable to counterspells, which I think has to be a pretty good thing. The counterspell decks have not been in a great place in Modern for a while. Even like Murktide kind of is still a fine deck, but not in the best spot. And this certainly gives those decks a lot more of a reasonable game plan against the cascade decks, because something like Murktide is really going to struggle against if they're getting to stick their Rhinos with counterspells behind. I'm hoping, because it's a Modern deck I've enjoyed playing in the past, this makes Indomitable Creativity a bit more of a viable strategy again as well, giving you more tools to fight against those cascade decks. But that might just not be, that might be wishful thinking, I think. Yeah, so not a game changer. I think certainly Rhino's still very, very viable. I think like the first weekend of results that came after this banning, it put up some really good results. I think it maybe even won a challenge. Basically just playing Ardent Plea via Azorius 1 instead of Violent Outburst. I think some decks even leaning into white a bit more and playing like Leyline Binding. I think the deck's still very powerful. It doesn't knock it off its perch, I don't really think. Living End, I think, is probably hit a little bit more, but certainly still a fine deck that you can register for a tournament.
Exactly. I guess the fact that Ardent Plea is importantly also 3 mana means that kind of the clock of the deck isn't really changing that much. You're still making 2 Rhinos on turn 3. It is just, it's more interactable now, I guess. But am I right in thinking that kind of like because Ardent Plea is in white, it now means that people are able to play like Solitude, which they weren't previously?
I've seen people trying to play Solitude. I think in Rhinos, it's kind of tough to get enough of a good white cards, because the thing is, you don't really want to pitch your Ardent Plea, right?
Yeah, that's
like fair. You don't want to be pitching your Cascade spell.
You'd just rather have 2 4/4 Rhinos, I guess. Yes.
Yeah. And Living End, I think there just aren't really enough good white cyclers to support Solitudes. Like again, obviously, you don't want to be running off just for Living Ends, but I think in Rhinos specifically, like Leyline Binding is pretty viable, and that's a very powerful card.
No, it makes sense. All good. And the only other format that saw a change is Vintage. Ponder was unrestricted. So, yeah, reading the notes on this, I didn't realize that Ponder had been restricted in Vintage, which means, for those who don't know, you can only run one of them. It's been restricted since 2008. And when you kind of look at the other cards that are restricted, you have like the Power 9, you have very broken Magic cards. So kind of, why was Ponder restricted, James, in comparison to those cards? Like Time Walk and Ancestral, it is not. And kind of like, is it just we've reached the point in Magic where kind of like it's been power crept to a point where this is kind of a bit silly to be on the restricted list, or am I kind of quite off with my take on that?
Yeah, I was chatting about this with our friend Josh Firetruck on Modo recently, who plays a lot more Vintage than me. And I think basically the reason it was restricted initially, right, is just that sheer volume of cantrips for blue decks is just too consistent, right? Was the idea like with Ponder and Preordain and Brainstorm. I think basically the main reason for the unrestriction is that probably the best like control deck at the moment, the best blue control deck is a Lurrus deck that's playing like 4 Wasteland, 4 Urza's Saga, doesn't actually play the 1 Ponder anyway, and that's sort of default the best deck in the format. So I guess gives a little bit of a buff to like Doomsday and the like that will play the extra 3 copies of Ponder, but I don't think it's a super impactful change. I don't think this knocks that Lurrus deck off top spot, really. I think the one thing I have to say about is that Vintage players like that they are looking at the currently restricted cards and what else can be unrestricted, rather than just always addressing the best deck by restricting a card from the best deck.
No, that's good. That makes sense. Kind of like the little bit of discourse I've seen about this is actually kind of like, it's not like people are now going to be going from 1 to 4 Ponders. I mean, they're more likely to be going from 1 to 2 Ponders because there's just other cards that they want to be running, but like a nice bit of, an extra bit of filtration, but not, you don't need 4 necessarily.
Yeah, I could see that. Or going like cut 2 Preordain for 2 more Ponder or something, right?
And then that's it for the formats. There's no other changes. James, are there any other formats that you think might have needed a change? Or are there any that kind of like you would have liked to have seen some tinkering to?
Yeah, I think the main other one people were talking about wanting a change in was Pioneer. Obviously, we just had a Pro Tour on Pioneer, in which Vector's Vampires won the tournament. But if you look at the data, the best deck was Is It Phoenix? And that's quite surprising in that Is It Phoenix was the deck everyone was targeting going in. So if it sort of has a target on its back, everyone's trying to beat it, and it's still putting up a really good win rate, then that suggests that, this probably is the best deck in the format by a reasonable amount. Having said that, I think, it's a pretty fun deck to play. I think it's not a deck that has like really horrible play patterns where you don't feel like you're in a game where you're playing against it. Like, it's a blue-red deck with cantrips and removal and card draw, right? Everyone loves that. And I think there was maybe just a bit of a thing going on of it's not really clear what you'd ban from Phoenix without to like significantly nerf the deck without killing it. Because I don't think the deck can survive if you ban Treasure Cruise, really.
Treasure Cruise is legal in Pioneer. Well,
Treasure Cruise is very much legal in Pioneer, yes.
Well, I have the easy ban, James. You ban that one.
Yeah. It's not unreasonable. The Treasure Cruise defenders will tell you that there are no fetch lands legal, so it's less powerful than in other formats.
Okay.
But yes, it's still very good. But yeah, if you don't ban Treasure Cruise, because I think that does kill the deck. I think even like Dig Through Time would not really do the same job in Phoenix, right? Because costing 2 mana is a big deal for that deck. And obviously you can't ban Arclight Phoenix without killing the deck. And then outside of that, it's like, what, you're going to ban Sleight of Hand or Consider or
Opt or something?
Yeah. Get that Picklock Prankster out of here.
I see what you mean. Also, just from looking at it, like, Is It Phoenix is actually quite a cheap deck compared to the rest of the format. I'm looking at the kind of Pioneer metagame, and this is averages. This is just empty Goldrich, but like, it's the cheapest deck in the top, like in the top 8 or so. Like Hidden Strings is around the same cost. Boris Aggro is the only one that's really cheaper, but kind of like, it's like half the price of Rakdos Vampires, which I guess beat it. Like that's to an extent, there is something to be said for budget decks being quite good, or relatively budget decks being the strongest deck in the format is kind of it's a good thing, but obviously, yeah, you do need to keep the power level correct. So yeah, there's probably something they can ban from this. Like, do you really need Temporal Trespass in this deck, James? The 11 mana, take an extra turn, delve spell.
I don't even know if it hurts the deck that much if you ban that card. Like, you have some good combo turns with it, but like there are versions of this deck that just don't run A, and I think that's like pretty reasonable. Yeah, and certainly if you're building a budget version, right, that's an easy $15 off the price if you cut that card. Yeah, I mean, I think the card that weirdly, I think was kind of made this go from a good deck to the best deck was Picklock Prankster. The adventure card is just a really nice way of cantrapping whilst milling yourself pretty significantly. Like, it enables your treasure cruise really well, and if you ever hit a Phoenix off it, you're in a great spot, really. That kind of replace piece of the puzzle, which obviously gets you 2 cards but costs 3 mana. So I guess you could ban that if you really wanted to, but it seems kind of weak. I don't know.
Right, so let's move on to our main topic of the day. Today, we're going to be doing our Cube set review for the Universes Beyond Fallout set that has just come out. So we've seen a number of these Universes Beyond now. This is we're definitely in the year of Universes Beyond where, like, the first couple seemed like massive slam dunks, especially, well, for me particularly anyway. Like, I loved Warhammer growing up. I loved Lord of the Rings growing up. I played a little bit of Fallout. James, what's your main memories of Fallout, and kind of like how hyped for this set are you from a thematic and like world point of view?
Yeah, I played a bit of Fallout 4 when it came out. I was quite shocked to learn that was 9 years ago, apparently. But honestly, reading through these cards, I was like, yeah, I actually don't remember many of these characters. So I think probably most of the flavor stuff is going to be wasted on me, unfortunately. Maybe I should have loaded it back up as a refresher. How about you? Have you played much Fallout?
I played a fair bit of Fallout 3 back in the day. I think I'm showing a little bit of the age difference between us there. I think that one came out about 5 years beforehand. Yeah. I really liked Fallout 3, and then kind of, for me, mechanic-wise, I never really clicked with the game. That's the main reason I didn't play with it as much. Like the that shooting thing didn't really click with me, as it were. But like from a world building point of view and like a lore point of view, I did really like that. Was the main thing that clicked with me. Kind of like the post-apocalyptic 60s Americana style world is really cool, and also they printed specifically a Sultai commander deck that cares about self-milling and like radiation counters, and that kind of seemed quite cool to me. So I'm probably going to pick that one up at some point. But
nice, yeah, that one looks sweet actually.
So, as always, we are comparing these cards to every other card in Magic. A lot of these cards are very cool and very thematic, especially, obviously, if you like Fallout. But if we're not high on a card, that doesn't mean it's a bad card. It just means that there are cards from the last 30 years that have come before it that we'd like for Cube a bit more. Also, because this is only a commander set, the power level is a little weird. Most of the cards are made for multiplayer, and also the color distribution is very off because they have to base it around the commander decks. So, for example, we're only talking about 1 blue card today, but we're talking about 5 red cards because red appears in more of the decks that we're looking at. James, there was something else that you wanted to mention about this set in particular and how it relates to Mitgo and therefore the Magic Online Cube.
Yeah, I think this isn't ideal. So they've said that they have no plans to bring the Fallout Commander decks to Magic Online, which I guess is some sort of licensing issue. Maybe they didn't get the rights to release them digitally. But these are cards that are legal in Eternal formats and obviously legal in Cube. And I think there's some cool ones, which would be good additions for Magic Online Cube. So it's a shame to not have them. But yeah, I think kind of a bigger issue is like, if there's legacy or vintage power level cards in here, but end up seeing play, then again, you have that separation between the paper format and the online format, which I think is really not ideal. We've seen that a bit with stuff like Poxwalkers in Vintage, seeing some play in Bazaar decks, but not legal on Magic Online. Yeah, I don't think there's anything super obvious in here that's like definitely a shoe-in for Legacy and Vintage. Obviously, they're hard formats to break into, but I think it is a bit of a concerning direction because obviously Magic Online is the place where probably a lot of people play those formats because they're very expensive to play in paper. And if they stop being quote unquote the real Legacy format on Magic Online, then that's kind of an issue, right?
No, 100%. I'll be completely honest. I did not even think about Legacy or Vintage. My mind was like, oh, it's a little bit annoying. You won't get to see these cards in the Vintage Cube. And there's like, oh, wait. Those formats thrive and are very important they're one of the main reasons to play Mitgo, actually. So, yeah, very disappointing, actually, I guess, from that point of view. For the time being, this is for paper, I guess. Let's take it away with our first white card of the day. First up, we have Gary Clone. This is 1 and a white for a 1/3 creature human citizen. It has Squad 2, which, as a reminder, is as initial cost to cast the spell, you may pay 2 generic any number of times. When this creature enters the battlefield, create that many tokens that are copies of it. It also has, when Gary Clone attacks, each creature you control named Gary Clone gets +1/+0 until end of turn. This is also, importantly, an uncommon, and that's kind of where I think it will most likely see play. So this is definitely one for Peasant. So I don't think you're excited paying 2 mana for this. So just 2 mana for a 2/3 on attacks is not really where you want to be. But if you play 4 for this, you will be attacking, I think it's with 2 3/3s. So 4 mana for 6 power is pretty solid, like at Peasant. I'm comparing this to other white 4-drops in Peasant, and like you have things like Glimmerpoint Stag and Relief Captain. It's not like you're comparing this to like Gideon Ally of Zendikar, that kind of thing. Kind of like the drop-off in power level from Peasant is fairly noticeable, if I'm honest. And in that environment, I think this is pretty solid and, yeah, kind of cool as well.
Yeah, no, I like this for Peasant. I think, it's probably most often going to be cast at 4, but that flexibility is really, really good. If you don't have a 2-drop in your opening hand and you're a vaguely aggressive white deck, you should absolutely be casting this card on turn 2. I think 2 mana, 2/3 attacker is it's not great, but it is a perfectly acceptable Magic card for Peasant Cube. And on 4, this is, as you say, 6 power, and it scales up really nicely. You do get to 6 in those formats, and this card seems like that flexibility is really going to carry it.
No, definitely, yeah. Cool card to begin with, I think. Then,
yeah. So next up, we have Securitron Squadron. This is 1 and a white for a 2/2 artifact creature robot. Has Squad 3, so that's and you cast it, you may pay an additional 3 any number of times and create that many tokens for a copy of it. It has Vigilance, and whenever a creature token enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this card, I think, has some pretty good potential. And you need to either be doing the tokens thing pretty hard or be caring about the artifact side of this. And the artifact decks often do just make a lot of tokens, incidentally, right? You'd see this in like a blue-white deck with Sahil even makes tokens, or the white artifact aggro theme has already been pretty pushed. This is going to, all your servos, all your Thopters, all your constructs, they're all going to come in with an extra +1/+1 counter. That's kind of nice. Also, if you get to 5, this is like a 2/2 and a 4/4, because the token will see itself and and the initial one. So I think this card has legs. Actually doesn't have legs. It has 1 wheel, but it has metaphorical legs. And I think if you're doing like white artifact aggro, or you're really pushing a tokens thing, this could be a cool addition.
Yeah, no, definitely. Kind of like the card I was comparing this to was like Intangible Virtue, which is like a 1 and a white to give all your tokens +1/+1. Kind of the difference between like that card, even till recently, was seeing play in like quite a lot of cubes, just as a support for a token deck. And kind of like that can come down afterwards. It like that anthem doesn't matter when you play it. Like this one, you need to play first in order to get the buff from the card. But the fact that the buff comes in the form of +1/+1 counters means that it's permanent if the anthem ever gets removed. So yeah, I think this is, because it kind of overlaps with 2 decks, kind of like the token eco white deck and the artifact deck, which are both decks that you do see in a fair amount of cubes nowadays. I think this could definitely see a place, and like, yeah, it's just being a card that multiple decks wants means I'm more interested in it, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, cool. Well, next up we have pre-war formal wear. It is 2 and a white for an artifact equipment. When pre-war formal wear enters the battlefield, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield and attach pre-formal wear to it. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has vigilance, and it has an equip cost of 3. So I don't mind this, actually. Like, it definitely needs setup, but the setup is having a creature in the graveyard in your white aggressive deck. That's not really going to be that hard. I think your opponent will play a blocker at some point, and you will trade off with the creature. So I don't think it's too hard to kind of find a world where you are getting, where you are activating this. And kind of like with most equipment that buffs power and toughness, it does get better on evasive creatures. Kind of like if you're in a deck with like things like an elite spellbinder or a flicker wisp, but actually bringing that back with this actually seems pretty strong. You get the value of those cards again. That's quite nice. Also, being able to Stoneforge Mystic for a reanimation spell is actually pretty nice. It turns your Stoneforge Mystic to get this in a way of bringing back a key creature. I do quite like that. The main issue generally with this and other bits of equipment is that you can only run so many non-creature spells or cards like this in a cube. And I think I prefer more of the Skyclave over this just because it's more likely to kill people, even though this has the upside of recurring a creature and giving it the same amount of power and toughness as more of the Skyclave. This gives it vigilance, the more gives it flying, so I think it generally works a bit better on a wider range of creatures, but I still think this is a very solid card. If you put this in your cube, I think it will do some decent work.
Yeah, I'm always a bit dubious of these cards in aggressive decks, just because I feel like in your white aggro deck, you really want to maximize the amount of time that you can just curve out with the cards from your hand, and having these situational cards in there that you just often aren't going to be able to cast the turn you want to cast them is, I think, is just like too much inconsistency for me. Because like this is too weak to just cast as an equipment, right? If you're not getting anything back, especially because it doesn't attach to anything if it comes in, if it doesn't return anything, and like it's free to re-equip. Like you can't just cast this if you don't have a target. Like absolutely, the games where like you play an Adeline on turn 3, they kill it, and then you bring the Adeline back. That's going to be phenomenal. You're going to feel really, really good about this card. But I just don't know if that's worth it for the amount of times where your Adeline got exiled, or they had a creature that blocks it, or it doesn't have a good attack. Like, I think for me, there's just a bit too much inconsistency, you know. Or like even they just like bounce your Adeline from under it, you know. It's I don't know. You can just see this card rotting in your hand a little bit too often for my taste.
No, I do think that's fair. Like it. I guess the sign of the best equipment out there is that they don't really need setup apart from having a creature in play. Whereas this needs the creature in the graveyard, which is, I don't think, I think it's doable, but I do agree is an extra hoop to step through rather than just running like a bone splitter, which is just efficient. Like, yeah, I do see that. Like part of it is kind of, I was kind of up for the fact that it's effectively a suit gives you +2/+2 and vigilance.
It's a good suit, you know?
Yeah, flashy.
yeah. I mean, it could do with a shirt, I'd argue, but it's a fine jacket.
All right, well, I think you should probably take it away with the next one.
Okay, next. I haven't even read the name, but this hasn't happened yet. No. Next up, we have James Wandering Dad. This is 3 mana for a 2/4 legendary creature human scientist. It has tap, add 2 colorless mana, spend this only to activate abilities. It also has an adventure, which is follow him for a blue and an X, which is investigate X times at instant speed. Good name. Seems aggressively slow to me. I don't know. That adventure is like a lot of time to convert that into an amount of cards you're going to be happy with. Like even if you cast the adventure for 2 and then cast the creature to start hopefully cracking some clues, you're like, you've spent 7 mana on this card? I don't know. And like, so I think I'm probably more into it if you were just really wanted the mana off the creature for other stuff. But then, you know, I've not seen anyone putting what was it called? The 1-mana 1/1 that had this ability in their cubes. And like, if you wanted that seems like a much better way to do it. Yeah, so I guess I think only if your cube is really quite slow would I consider this card.
No, I could see that. So I put this on the list, like specifically just because we have come straight after a set that cares about a fair bit about investigate. So I'm thinking like in the previous set, like Murders of Karlov Manor, we had Alquist Proft Master Sleuth that turns clues into Sphinx's Revelations, that kind of stuff. So there could be some synergy in lower power level cubes that specifically care about investigate style mechanic. That's the thing, like, yeah. I think this is an interesting card, but I'd agree. It's super. It is relatively slow. I also didn't realize this was a rare, so that was on the part of.
Yeah. I mean, we absolutely had to include it anyway, because otherwise we'd have no blue cards, and that would be pretty. And wouldn't be on board with that.
I think the best blue card in the set for what's that worth. Also worth noting, like, I'm not sure artwork wise, but this character is Liam Neeson.
Let's just make it better.
Yeah. It was like so we're slowly ticking off beautiful celebrities. So this one is Liam Neeson. So let's go.
Is that a cube theme we can build?
Potentially. I mean, yeah, like Doctor Who had a fair number of just like real world people. Like, I can't believe we talked about Kylie Minogue, like a card that's meant to be Kylie Minogue, but it's very clearly they did not pay for the royalties for Kylie Minogue.
Yeah.
Because we both had no idea that was her.
Yeah, that passed me by. Cool.
All right, well, let's hastily move on to our first black card of the day. Next up, we have Butch Deloria Tunnel Snake. This is 1 black for a 2/2 legendary creature human rogue. It has Menace, and it has Tunnel Snake's Rule. Whenever Butch Deloria Tunnel Snake attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each other rogue and or snake you control. And it also has pay 1 black to put a Menace counter on another target creature. It becomes a rogue in addition to its other types. So this one is an uncommon, and I do think this is actually fairly solid for Peasant. There are some rogues and also snakes in Peasant Cube, but for the point of evaluating it, I'm going to imagine this is the only rogue you have on the board. So just firstly, 2 mana for a 2/2 Menace is just solid. That is perfectly fine stats if you're trying to be anywhere near aggressive in your black deck. Then 2 mana to give another one of your creatures Menace, and then to give this a +1 when it attacks. I think it's pretty good. Like, it's a black aggressive threat that's actually fine in the late game, and obviously it'll scale if you turn more of your things into snakes and rogues. And like, obviously you would want to be doing better things, but sometimes your things get removed, sometimes you just draw land. This at least lets you, it's a bit of a mana sink late game. I like the fact it's best in mono black aggro or a black aggressive deck, maybe its main downfall, because we've kind of gone over, neither of us are super hot on those style of archetypes. But in that deck, I do think this will actually be a solid creature, just base stats wise and what it can do to a board state. I think is going to be quite good.
Yeah, I think I agree with all that. I can see it for Peasant, probably not much outside of that. All right, next up we have Nuclear Fallout. This is black X for sorcery. For text, each creature gets twice -X until end of turn, and each player gets X rad counters. Inexplicably, there's no reminder text actually on the card to tell you what a rad counter does. But we can let's read out what a rad counter does. Yeah, I don't think that's reasonable assumed knowledge. So rad counter gets attached to the player in a similar way to like energy or whatever does, and or infect, poison counters, I guess. A rad counter at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase. If you have any rad counters, mill that many cards. For each non-land card milled this way, you lose 1 life and add a rad counter.
I've only just realized the token itself says radiation.
Oh, does it? I haven't seen it.
Which is different. And like, I get it. I know it's in Fallout, but whenever anyone says the word rad counter, all I think is like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like radical, dude. Like,
yeah. What we have learned is that lands are not rad.
Yeah, lands are not rad.
I think this card's really pretty strong, actually. Sweepers at scale are really nice because you can scale them to the board, and it means you don't necessarily have to kill all of your creatures if you have larger creatures than your opponent. And this is actually really efficient. Like, Infest is already like a pretty reasonable card, like 3 mana -2/2 to everything. And Languish is just a card that people put in their cubes sometime, which is 4 mana, -4/-4 to everything. And this does both of those things as efficiently at those mana points, but with flexibility. You can get your Infest if you need it on turn 3. You can scale this up to kill really big stuff in the late game. Anyone who's played with Toxic Deluge knows how powerful that effect is. In terms of the counters, they're interesting. I think there will be decks where the rad counter is a downside. I think there'll be decks where it's an upside. The downside obviously being if you're like the control deck playing against the beatdown deck and you cast that you like find your sweeper when you're on like 5 life and you get a few rad counters, then that damage makes you feel like you really need to end the game kind of quickly, which isn't necessarily ideal. But black decks like milling themselves, and there's quite a nice thing of because they do the milling and the damage first. If you cast this for like quite a high amount, they're going to deck before you do. If they're on a similar life total, they're probably going to die to damage before you do. So I think, there's upsides and downsides for rad counters. I think there are decks where they'll be great. Like imagine like a Lotus deck, right? You like cast this for like X's 2, you mill like 2 cards, then 3 cards. You're really starting to like stock up your graveyard. And then your recurring stuff for your Lotus, and or even like an Underworld Reach deck. I think that could be kind of powerful. But even in just a regular control deck, I think this is like obviously it's worse than Deluge because Deluge is kind of busted. It's probably on average a little bit worse than Damnation, but I don't even think that's completely clear. But I think it's definitely like the 3rd best black sweeper, probably. Like if you're running Languish in your cube, I think this is a pretty clear upgrade on that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. The thing I think that's interesting with this card is I could almost see you playing this in an aggressive deck. And kind of hear me out on this, because a lot of the black aggressive creatures are quite recursive. Like I'm thinking things like Gutterbones, like Bloodghast. They are things that can bring themselves back from the graveyard. And the fact that kind of late game, so rad counters will kill players. Like each one is effectively a life loss. And like that is a different angle for an aggressive deck. Kind of like you beat them down as much as possible. As soon as they stabilize, you wrath the board with this. Give both players a ton of rad counters. You don't care as much because you've been beating them down. Then you can bring your board back slowly over the next couple of turns. And in theory, when they were stabilizing, that was them emptying their hand. Like that being true might be a little bit too niche, but I do think that is a cool angle you could possibly do with this card.
Yeah, sounds spicy. I think it is definitely a card you want to keep in mind when you're building the rest of your deck, like beyond just being a sweeper. It makes life gain much more relevant, because if you're playing a long game with this in play, your post casting this card, your life total is really going to matter. Playing life gain is great. Converse of that is also true. Paying life is less good if you have this in your deck, because if you're on like 10 and you have 5 rad counters, then you're going to get pretty reluctant about paying life for effects.
No, definitely. Very cool and very interesting card. And I guess that, I do agree that kind of the base level is that it's probably the 3rd best board wipe in black, potentially. Like maybe that there is an argument with like Meat Hook Massacre, but like they kind of go in different style of decks, if that makes sense. Like Meat Hook Massacre is kind of, I guess, like more aristocratic style of thing, whereas this kind of also goes in like self-mill decks as well. So yeah, there are different plays for these type of cards.
Yeah, I mean, Meat Hook obviously has like the cool build around potential, but like to Meat Hook for 4 costs 6 mana.
That's true.
Whereas this for 4 costs 4. Like,
yeah, efficiency wise, this is
Meat Hook for 2 costs 4. Like, yeah, like it's like obviously there are decks where Meat Hook would be better if you're an aristocrat's deck, but there are decks where you play Meat Hook just as a 2 mana enchantment that never kills anything.
No, it makes sense. Cool card. I initially missed this one on the way through, but then this might be another one I have to test out, because I do have Toxic Deluge, Damnation, and Meat Hook Massacre, and I don't really have an aristocrat theme in my cube anymore. So this seems like a cool addition. Right, let's move on now to our next black card of the day. Next up, we have Vats. It is 2 black for instant with split second, which means that as long as this spell is on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. The effect of the card is choose any number of target creatures with equal toughness, destroy the chosen creatures. So this is a very interesting card. You pick any number of creatures with toughness that are the same. So you choose any number of 1/1s, for example, and this will destroy them. So generally speaking, 4 mana removal spell is not really it anymore. It's not really where you want to be. we are quite far past that. But if you can take out 2 creatures with this, then that is quite good, and I think you're probably happy with that. This is also basically uncounterable as well with that split second. Like, they can't respond to this with a counter spell or even try and like save their creature because of the split second. That is quite interesting. I do like that. As a base level, this is like a 4-mana like murder, basically. But technically, the ceiling is that this could be a one-sided uncounterable board wipe. I know you have to reach for that a little bit, but that's technically the ceiling of this card.
Yeah, I think it's one of those cards where your mind immediately jumps to the best case scenario, right? Where you get like 3 of their creatures and it's phenomenal. And that will definitely happen. Like, you play this card against mono green, kill a bunch of elves, or like against mono white. And because mono white, often they're even their 2 and 3 drops, a lot of them have 1 toughness. They have a lot of 2/1s and 3/1s, right? So the potential is really there. The real downside this has over other removal spells is like, yeah, it's great against the decks that are just all creatures, but the decks where it's like, yeah, maybe they've got like 9 or 10 creatures and they're all big threats. Well, it's like, A, they're not likely to have 2 in play that happen to be the same toughness, and B, you're not going to be like hanging around waiting for them to play a second one, right? Like, their creature suite is like, yeah, I've got like this Bowman, this Dark Confidant, and this Shieldred, and a Graveyard Trespass or whatever. Like, you need to kill a lot of those creatures on site. And 4 mana is just so much, you know? Like, I already think like 3 mana removal spells are pretty suspect a lot of the time. I don't think, I would not be main decking this in most black decks, I don't think. Like, Split Second is nice, but it's, I just kind of don't think it's worth it.
No, I think that's fair. I think we're going to be at a point soon, like we saw this with Bitter Triumph printed last, like in a recent set. They're kind of like, we're getting to a point now where it's soon going to be you're either paying 2 mana to destroy a creature or a planeswalker with some kind of downside, or it's free to cast and a bit inefficient, like thinking like Snuff Out or Contagion, that kind of thing. Like, kind of that's kind of the world we're going to be at sooner than you think with black removal spells. If that's the world we're going to, that's just 4 mana just doesn't really cut it.
Yep, for sure. On to our first red card of the day. We have Assaultron Dominator. This is 1 red for a 2/2 artifact creature robot. When Assaultron Dominator enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. And whenever an artifact creature you control attacks, you may pay 1 energy. If you do, put your choice of a +1/+1 counter, a first strike counter, or a trample counter on that creature. And it'd be evaluating this assuming you have no other energy in your cube, because I just don't think there are that many other good energy cards. If you're trying to do an energy theme, I think, this is a slam dunk, but we'll assume that that's not the case. I think this is probably pretty good in artifact aggro. If you're getting 2 triggers off this, you're getting 4/4 worth of stats, unless one of the other counters happens to be better. That's really strong for 2 mana, even if it's, you're not getting it all immediately. It's much better if you have other artifact creatures, so you get one of those counters right away when you play it. You play this, attack for your artifact creature, put a counter on it, is a much stronger play pattern than just casting this and attacking it as a 3/3 the next turn, because means you get some value up front and you're a bit less sad if this dies to a removal spell or whatever. I probably wouldn't put it in like generic red aggro if I didn't have any other artifact creatures. I just kind of think there are better options. Like, it wouldn't be embarrassing in that spot. It's a totally fine card. Like, you attack for it twice, it becomes a 4/4. That's really good. But there are just other 2-drops that are a little better in that spot, I think. But yeah, for like an artifact themed aggro deck, I think this is really quite strong.
No, definitely. I actually quite like this card. This is actually my favorite card of the set. I saw this one, and this was a kind of instant slam dunk test for me, because just I agree with everything you said, but kind of just simple thing. But there's so many other things that this can just like do what those decks want. Kind of just giving a construct token trample.
Yeah, that's true. That's a pretty big game.
Or specifically giving both of your construct tokens off of your Urza Saga trample with this one card is kind of nuts. I think this is just really, really flexible. A lot of red aggro decks in certain cubes are naturally running artifact creatures anyway. I'm thinking like Bomat Carrier. Like I've been running Reinforced Ronin in mine. I've been quite impressed by that. Like in my cube, this is going to be specifically replacing Lizard Blades. I'm swapping Lizard Blades out. Going to be bringing this in. I think it just does a bit more. It's a bit more interesting than just like a creature with double strike, basically. What you mentioned about energy, I do completely agree with. I would say in the past, I was running Aether Hub purely as a fast land that fixes for aggro decks. If Aether Hub is a land that comes in, gives you an energy, it taps for a colorless, and it can tap, and you can pay an energy to add 1 mana of any color, I believe. I was running that as a one-time fixing land specifically for aggro decks. I'm not saying add it in to make like an energy deck, but kind of like just a nice bit of synergy because this will go in an aggressive deck. Aether Hub is for aggressive decks as well. I thought it was pretty good in those because it is an untapped land that basically the aggro deck can use on turn 2 or 3 to fix itself, to play its splash, something like that. In those type of builds, I could see running that with Assault Dominator just for an additional bit of synergy. But yeah, by itself, I think the Assault Dominator is just a cool card, and yeah, I'm looking forward to sleeving it up.
Nice.
Cool. All right, let's move on to our next red card of the day. Next, we have Crimson Caravaneer. It is 2 and a red for a 1/2 creature human scout with double strike, trample, and whenever Crimson Caravaneer deals combat damage to a player, create a junk token. So a junk token is a new type of artifact token. It is an artifact with tap, sacrifice this artifact, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn and activate only as a sorcery. Crimson Caravaneer is also importantly a uncommon. This is another one, I think, for Peasant. So it's an aggressive card that, again, can go in that artifact deck. It has the potential to make a fair amount of artifacts. It happens anytime it deals combat damage to a player. I do like junk as a token. It's kind of like if Clue is a Clue feels more blue, basically. This is like the red version of the Clue. I like that kind of impulse draw that we see in red. I do like the fact that you don't have to pay mana to do it. That is quite nice. You do it as a sorcery, so you're forced to do it on your own turn, but the fact it's free is quite good. I think junk is going to be better in the Arista Scrappy style of deck where you care about sacrificing artifacts because you don't have to pay mana to sack it. That's just generally better for Arista kind of decks. Having said that, I think, if I'm honest with you, when it comes down to it, this is the same issue that any 3 mana like double striker has with low power, is that for this to be good, you need to really raise its power at least by 1. So you need to be really running this if you have it in a deck where you can put equipment on it or a +1 counter as a way of just dealing up that damage. Because if you can give this 2 power, the double strike and trample becomes much more relevant then. As a 1/2, double strike and trample is kind of nice to have, but not really there on a 3/3. Like effectively, this is a 3 mana 2/2 on attacks. That's not really where you want to be. Like, yeah, you need that counter on it. So if you have that in your Peasant cube and you're thinking of playing around with artifacts and like artifact go-wise stuff, then maybe this is a card you can consider. But if not, then probably not.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I think, yeah, you need to be pumping this. It's not a playable Magic card otherwise. To be like, it trades with a 2/2 and dies to every removal spell in existence. That's not an acceptable set of qualities for a 3 mana card that doesn't do anything when it enters the battlefield. Yeah, but I could see it with equipment or pump spells like Giant Growth Fist. It's great. Become Immense Fist, you hit him for 14. That's pretty good.
That's
and
cool. Yeah.
Trample and Double Strike do play quite nicely together with those pump spells. But yeah, you can't just put this in any deck. And honestly, even in the decks who really want pump spells, often they'd rather have like cheaper creatures to pump, right?
Yeah.
So you can get that going a bit earlier. 3
mana it feels so much with this card.
Yeah, I think I would actually rather have in most of those decks like a 2 mana 1/1 double strike trample without these fist text. I think would be a better card.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, just more efficient and just more aggressive.
All right, next up we have Grim Reaper's Sprint. This is 4 and a red for an enchantment aura. It has Morbid. If this spell costs 3 less to cast if a creature died this turn, so it goes down to 1 and a red. And when Grim Reaper's Sprint enters the battlefield, untap each creature you control. If it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and haste. Yeah, I'm not a big This just seems pretty situational to me. Like, to get that really good case where you like get your stack buff and another good combat step, like a lot of stuff needs to line up for that to happen in reality. Because you need to have a good attack, right? This doesn't really give you a good attack. Unless you just run it out pre-combat, in which case you're not getting that morbid, so it's woefully inefficient. So you've got to already have good attacks on board, so you're already somewhat ahead. Don't like cards that are any good when you're ahead. And then in that good attack step, you have to have at least one creature die, but not so many creatures dying that you don't have another set of good attacks, and you still have something reasonable to put this on. And then you can cast it for 2 mana, untap your stuff, and hopefully have another good combat step. That just feels like way too much for me. Like, it's, it doesn't have flash or anything, so you don't have that like backup case of using it as a trick. It just seems like way too expensive if you don't morbid it, and I'm kind of not really buying it.
I definitely agree that it needs setup, and it is definitely win more-y. But this is where we kind of differ. I do like this card, but I do agree that it is bad. Everything I'm about to say, I will preface this that I know that this is not good.
Okay, I respect that, yeah.
But like in like a Gruul Monsters kind of deck, because the thing is, it doesn't have to be your creature that died. So like, say you attack with your team, they do a bit of chump blocking, that kind of stuff. It's your opponent's creature that dies. Like, say you have like something like a Tarmogoyf, for example, that's like a 3/4 or 4/5. You attack with it, they chump with a token or like their 1/1, something like that. You then put this back on that creature. You can then attack again with it, and the rest of your team, like your whole team, untaps, and you get to attack again. So kind of like, it's the morbid I see you as triggering by you cast this in your second combat phase after you've already attacked. And I agree, you definitely have to be in a winning position already, but it does shorten the amount of time that it's going to take you to win. It can kind of push you over the edge. The other thing as well is I would assume with this, they're kind of like, even if they kill the creature that this is targeting, so say you cast this, put it on a creature, they kill it, this will still enter the battlefield, won't it? So
if they kill the creature in response to this, it won't enter the battlefield.
Does it not? Does it not enter the battlefield and then fall off?
No, it fizzles.
Oh, it fizzles. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Well, then I like it less, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree there's upside there. Like, it will occasionally, I think winning races is kind of the best thing it does, right? If they're like beating you down with flyers, you're attacking on the ground, they like block with one thing, and then you cast this, get another combat step and kill them. Like, yeah, obviously that's good, but it just feels like way too narrow to me.
No, I don't get it. Like, if your cube is specifically like battle cruisery, if that makes sense, kind of like if it's like 5/5s and 6/6s slamming into each other, then I think this could be cool in that. But yeah, I do agree in kind of more tuned environments where you can interact with your opponents, then maybe this is fine, James, fine.
Sorry, I'll rein in my inner martial Sutcliffe.
No, all good. Someone needs to rein me in, James. All right. Next up, we have another enchantment. Next up, we have Vault 21 House Gambit. It is 1 and a red for enchantment saga. This is our first saga of the day. So chapter 1 and chapter 2 are both discard a card and then draw a card. And then chapter 3 is reveal up to 5 non-land cards from your hand. For each of those cards that had the same mana value as another card revealed this way, create a treasure token. So base level, this just rummages you twice over 2 turns. And then at the end, you make some treasures, like an amount. The issue is I don't really know where this goes. It kind of sort of wants to be kind of the top end of an aggro deck where you're more likely to have a higher density of like low drop spells. They're going to get all the treasure. Like, you're more likely to hit a load of 1-drops or a load of 2-drops if you're in an aggro deck compared to like a mid-range deck where you'll have creatures all up and down the curve. But then in an aggro deck, you don't want to be playing this on turn 2 because you want to be playing a creature on turn 2. And in theory, later in the game, you won't have as many cards in your hand to get as much value off of this with the counters. So this could be like a big red mana style of deck where it wants lots of mana. Like, you play this when you have 5 mana, dig to a Rabble Master and a threat maybe, and then turn any lands that are stuck in your hand into treasure to ramp up bigger things. But again, that seems like a lot of setup, actually. Yeah, my main thing is I'm just not sure what deck wants this, but I also am aware I could just be overthinking it, and just the ability to just rummage over 2 turns, trigger some madness stuff might just be fine. Like, what do you think, James?
Yeah, I'm kind of low on this one. I think the thing is with the treasure that unless you cast this on turn 2, the treasure's often going to be too late, right? You're going to be not have that many cards in your hand when you get to the treasure stage of this. Because it's not like you're going to be holding your spells. Because it's like, oh, I've got to make. I can't cast this 2-drop because I've got to make treasure with it in another turn. Like you're just going to play your spells. So yeah, I think like often by the time you've got to that treasure stage, it's like, yeah, I can cast most of my spells anyway. And then just using it as a looting thing, like compare this to Tormenting Voice, and you never put Tormenting Voice in cubes anymore because there's a bunch of like slightly better versions of that effect. But if you compare this with Tormenting Voice, like this, you're just down a card from rummaging twice. Because yeah, you cast the spell, so you need the treasure to be worth a card, and I think often it isn't going to be. Yeah, I think you'd be better off with Tormenting Voice in most decks.
No, yeah, I think that's fair.
I guess the only good bit is that if you're all about the madness, then it's kind of nice that you get the second rummage with all your mana untapped. Like Tormenting Voice, you tap 2 mana and then have to pay for a madness cost. Whereas that second one, you don't have to spend any mana before you do the rummage, so you can maybe like pay a more expensive madness cost is kind of good. But
yeah, makes sense. Yeah, you can spread, and also just generally spreading the madness over 2 turns means that you could do Root Waller for free on the first turn, and then pay for something a bit more pricey on the second turn. Yeah, like it is specifically if your cube is full of madness that this gets, I guess, playable. But then
I know, but like, have you read Inti? You know, like that's how I want to play madness cards.
Yes, that is true. But the issue with Inti, James, is that why do you play madness cards? Like, this is the issue I'm having right now, trying to add madness back into my cube. Is I could play Blazing Root Waller, or I could just play Inti. Like, it doesn't need a Root Waller to be good. Is the thing.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
So maybe in more in lower powered level cubes or something like that, where madness is still stronger. I don't know, like the madness conversation is one we need to have in the future at some point, because I do want to add it back. I do miss it.
Yeah. No, I think that deck you can make work if it's not like the most hyper streamlined cube. I'm not sure that this card is necessarily the way.
No, I think that's fair. All right, last red card, James. You want to take it away?
Yeah. Next up, we have Veronica, Dissident Scribe. This is 2 and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature human artificer rogue. It has menace, and whenever Veronica Distant Scribe attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Also has whenever you discard 1 or more non-land cards for the first time each turn, create a junk token. Reminder, that's the sacrifice fee junk token to exile the top card of your library, and you may play it this turn. I think this card's pretty cool. Like, you're gonna get to attack quite a lot of the time with your 3/3 menace. You'll have a reasonable attack with that. And then you get this trigger, and that's nice value. You can start accumulating junk. But I really like it if you have a bunch of other ways to discard things, because that ability triggers off all discards, not just this one. Even you play this when you like land cycle your Oliphant, and you get a junk token, and that's kind of nice. I don't know why it says for the first time each turn. That's hey, let us have our fun, you know.
So they didn't have to print it onto Mitko, James.
Yeah, maybe. So I kind of only have good things to say about this card, other than they're really good red 3-drops in cube, you know, and they all kind of do something right away. You don't have to untap with them, and you know, you look at like Guts, Broadside Bombardiers, Lalia, Seasoned Pyromancer, Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, like,
or just any like Rabble Master style card will just deal more.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But I think because you've got like this and like Inti and Currency Converter all kind of want you to just be discarding cards. Like maybe that's like a little bit of synergy you can lean into. And yeah, this is probably pretty good in a madness deck, right?
No, definitely, kind of, and that's the thing. Like where one of the things I've been thinking about with madness is it's almost not a madness deck. It's a deck that cares about you casting cards from places other than your hand, which madness is. But also, there's a lot of cards that reward you when you, or there's a growing number of cards that reward you when you cast cards from things like exile. So I'm thinking specifically like Faldorn, Dreadwolf Herald, it makes like 2/2 walls whenever you cast a card from exile, which is both madness and actually, is it madness?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So there are cards like Faldon which are getting printed like not at a wide open rate, but like cards like Inti and things like that are being printed, which kind of cares about this red impulse draw type thing. So as more of those get printed, that's probably where like what was the madness archetype could move into, because it is also in the right colors. Like it's in Gruul. That is where a lot of the madness cards traditionally are. So something for the future, I think. And I want there to be something there, and it's something I'm going to be trying at some point. It's kind of like you have Veronica, you have Inti, you have Lelia. These are all good Magic cards by themselves, and then if you add Falton to kind of give it a bit of synergy, that could be quite cool.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see it. Like, I think I'm not slamming it into Powered Cube, but I think there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with this card, and I'm kind of excited to see some good homes for it.
No, definitely. Right, let's move on to our first green card of the day. First up, we have Watchful Radstag. This is 2 and a red for a 2/2 creature elk mutant. It has Evolve, which as a reminder is whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a +1 counter onto this creature. And then it has, whenever Watchful Radstag evolves, create a token that's a copy of it. Okay, so I will start off by saying that 3 mana for a 2/2 that does nothing by itself is not good. I know this. James is nodding. Good. I've done it. So if you don't have another creature to cast after this to evolve, then this is pretty bad. Also, as a top deck late game, it does nothing by itself. Again, that is not great. Which those two things probably means it will not see play, because that is a fair amount of times that's probably about 50% of the times that you're going to see this card, and that means it probably isn't good enough. But this is very cool, and there are games where you like the other half of the games, you will play this on like turn 3, play a 4-powered creature on 4, make another one of these, and then either play another 4-powered creature or a 5-powered creature the next turn and make 2 more of these. Those situations, when that happens, you will win games, but there are also plenty of other cards that if you play the card and then cards that are sequentially better and work with it, you'll also win those games too. So I like this card. I think it's cool. I'm kind of any kind of card that reminds me of Scoot Swarm, I like, and I am immediately wary of, because I know how good Scoot Swarm can be in certain games of Magic. But yeah, I think the 1-on-1 cube is probably not the format where Watchful Radstag is its most powerful.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with most of that. The good case for this card is really, really strong, right? You play Elf into this. Downside is this dies to everything. It didn't do anything the turn it entered. Like, it's quite hard to trigger Evolve the same turn you play this. But if they don't kill it, you're probably in really good shape, right? If you have any reasonable hand of creatures to follow this up with, you're going to win the game pretty quickly. Like, this will attack 3 right away and make another one, then you cast a second creature after this, and you're making 2 more. They're all getting big. Your opponent is going to die to a horde of angry mutant elks, and that seems cool.
It is cool.
That stag is rad. But yeah, all the things you say apply. It dies to everything. It doesn't do anything return to enter. It's probably going to be pretty bad if you draw it late. If I was like a really creature-heavy green deck with like, and a lot of my creatures were kind of big, I would probably play this because that upside is so high. But outside of that, not so much. Because it's like you need to not be like just elves and big stuff, right? And you need your 4s and 5s not to be planeswalkers and stuff. They need to be creatures. So it is kind of putting some requirements on you there. But yeah, like kind of like red-green beats, maybe it's decent.
No, definitely. Yeah. It's a cool card. Just raw power level, it might struggle. I do want to play games with this card, so I am going to pick one up. But yeah, just Cube might not be it. But Commander and other things, I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next up, we have Well Rested. This is 1 green for an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature has, whenever this creature becomes untapped, put 2+1/+1 counters on it, then you gain 2 life and draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. Again, this once each turn flex. Like, why don't they want us to have fun, you know? This card is super high upside. If you can get this going, it's really, really strong. Like, 2 counters and a card each turn is pretty phenomenal. said that I definitely don't like trying to get it going just by I'll put it on something and attack with it each turn to get the counters and the card, because this doesn't give you any stats up front. It doesn't give you stats until the next turn. So your creature has to already have a good attack. It is kind of cool with like elves, though, right?
Yeah. Mana Dorks is very cool.
Yeah, you just go turn 1 elf, turn 2, put this on your elf. Obviously, your elf will untap for next turn. You tap it again to cast your spell. Just each time you're getting a card each turn, and your elf is getting giant pretty quickly to a point where it actually can attack. That seems really strong if it works. But it's just the fact that you don't get the card until your next untap step means that when you put this on your elf, it's not like your opponent has to have mana up to blow you out. If they have a removal spell in their hand, you're getting blown out, right? They're just going to untap. They have their turn to kill this creature, and you didn't get your card back. And that's like, they already wanted to kill your elf. Don't like give them an extra card for doing so, right?
Yeah.
But if you're against a like low removal deck, this can run away with games, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the Mana Dork one was the main thing I was thinking of with this card. Just it works nicely within green. I guess I could see a world where kind of like Simic Tempo, where you're running like Fairy Masterminds and like Ledger Treasures, kind of like cheap creatures or cheap blue creatures with the evasion tacked on. If that's kind of that and elves are what your deck is, then I think it's very good in that because you have both the things you want to put it on. But yeah, primarily Dorks, just because it works really nicely with it, I think is just going to be the best place for this.
Yeah, sure. I made a note about Pilly Pala combo, but then they took it away from me with that stupid once each turn.
All right, let's move on to our first multicolored card of the day. First up, we have Craig Boone, Novak Guard. It is 1, a red and a white for a 3/3 legendary creature human soldier. It has reach, lifelink, and 1 for my baby, which is an ability that says, whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, put 2 quest counters on Craig Boone, Novak Guard. When you do, Craig Boone deals damage equal to the number of quest counters on it to up to 1 target creature, unless that creature's controller has Craig Boone deals that much damage to them. Again, this is importantly an uncommon. So this actually seems very solid. Just again, this is going to be one for peasant. That's kind of why we're mentioning a lot of these uncommons. But I just think it's going to be actually pretty good. Like taking out a creature that could block this is just going to be nice, or a creature that can you play this on 3. It doesn't have to be this creature. If you play aggressive creature on 1, aggressive creature on 2, and attack with those, you will get that trigger the turn you play this just with those creatures attacking. So you're in an aggressive deck, you're either going to be taking out a blocker or dealing some damage straight to your opponent. Both of those are things that Boros aggressive decks are kind of here for. I think as a card, it's a perfectly solid, nice little package, and I could see it, compared to some of the other cards that Peasant Cube has access to. I know recently we've had things like Shadow Fax and that kind of stuff being printed, but it wasn't that long ago that kind of I don't think we're at a point where kind of there is a depth of super high impactful Boros uncommons, and this I definitely could see getting into a lot of those cubes.
Yeah, I could see it. And not only does it have reach, it has surprise reach.
Yes.
I am attacking my 2/1 flyer into this.
Every day,
yeah. Keep reach on green cards. Just putting it out there.
Yeah.
I can't even see why he has reach, really. He's in a tall building? That's no man.
I'm going with he's in a watchtower.
Sure. I feel like anyone could get in a watchtower, though, you know?
Yeah.
That means you can climb stairs.
Right, let's have a look.
But yeah, I agree with all the other things you said. I think, pretty solid for Peasant Cube. I think if you have a lot of 1s and 2s, it gets a lot better, right? Because you can trigger it for turn you play, as you said. But I think probably a bit low power for most other cubes. But seems really solid in Peasant.
Sorry, he has a sniper rifle.
Okay.
That's why he has reach. I'm on board with that.
That's a bit more legit.
He has archer reach. That's what it is.
I think it needs to be a bit more prominent in VR, you know?
Yeah, I think they generally shied away a little bit from just having guns on Magic cards.
Yeah. So we're going to have the gun, but you can't really see the gun.
It's behind it. Don't worry. Yeah. All good. All right. Do you want to take it away with a Rakdos card?
Yeah, so next up we have Legate Lanius, Caesar's Ace. This is 2, a red and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature human soldier. has Decimate. When Legate Lanius enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a 10th of the creatures they control, rounded up. That is a lot of words for your opponent sacrifice a creature. And
it could be 2 if you're really losing.
you're dead if it's 2. You're already dead.
I haven't attacked you yet. It's fine.
It also has, whenever an opponent sacrifices a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. I don't think you really be spending 4 mana for this. Like, I'd so much rather just have a Ravenous Chupacabra and get to kill the thing I want to kill. Like, sure, this is going to be a 3/3 most of the time, because they're presumably not playing this if they don't have a creature, but yeah, I think the Edicts is just enough worse than the targeted removal that, yeah, I'd rather have like a Chupacabra or something, and that card is Peasant Legal. I don't know if you need a ton of them. I'd rather have even the like 1/1 artifact fire, whatever that's called, to kill something.
No, fair. I think the main place where this works is specifically, or the only ways it can work is specifically if you're running other cards that do a similar thing, like Fleshbag Marauder. This is effectively kind of Fleshbag Marauder tribal.
But I just don't want a ton of Edicts. Edicts aren't very good.
No, yeah, I know. I'm well aware. Yeah, because so there you go. The Edict conversation is definitely one we should probably have at some point, because people will still run things like Shield's Edict, and because I think it can make their sacrifice planeswalkers, maybe that kind of thing. But like generally speaking, I am past the point of any edicts in Cube. But
yeah, Shield's Edict has a bit of upside as well, because you can sack a planeswalker, but you can also choose if they sack a token or a non-token.
Yeah,
which kind of removes a lot of the downside of edicts, right? When they just sack their super token. But yeah, I think in general, it's not where you want to be, right? It's just too many, like, they're too likely to have some low impact creature hanging around, and then this doesn't kill what you need to kill.
No, exactly. Yeah. It is. Yeah, it's a 4 mana 3/3 that makes them sack their worst creature. Yeah, and I guess specifically as well, the chances of it growing are very slim. Like again, kind of like there are cards to make that work. It's just whether that's what you want your Rakdos session to be doing when there's a lot of other cool things that Rakdos can do. Right, but from one Rakdos card that I think we're a bit underwhelmed with to one I actually quite like. Next up, we have Kellogg Dangerous Mind. This is 1 black-red for a 3/2 legendary creature, human mercenary. It has first strike and haste, so just at a base level, that's quite good body and stats. It also has, whenever Kellogg Dangerous Mind attacks, create a treasure token, and then sacrifice 5 treasures, gain control of target creature for as long as you control Kellogg, activate only as a sorcery. So, yeah, as I mentioned, just perfectly fine aggressive body, 3 mana, 3/2 first strike haste is going to be getting in for damage the turn it comes in. Yeah, if you play this on turn 3, you're probably killing what's blocking it, or it's getting through unblocked, meaning that you're probably getting to attack with it twice, meaning you're making 2 treasures with it. So if you can play this on 3, attack on turn 3, and then attack on turn 4, if you can make 2 treasures off this and play your 6-drop on turn 4 in your Rakdos deck, that's pretty good. I don't hate that. That's quite nice. Along with obviously the synergies that come with Rakdos about more and more nowadays about wanting artifacts in those kind of colors. That's the thing. I've been running like Bloodtithe Harvester in Rakdos for a while, and this is kind of, I'm not sure if it's better than that, but it is comparable. Like, well, is Bloodtithe Harvester just 2 mana to cast?
Yeah, it's 2 to cast, and you get a blood instead of a treasure.
But,
I quite like Bloodtithe, but I think a lot of the reason I like it is because it's good in Red-Black Reanimator, because it gives you a discard outlet.
That's fair. Yeah. The blood in that niche is like, yeah, it's more synergistic than just ramping you, basically.
Yeah, I think this is a solid card, though. Like, 3/2 first strike haste is just like gonna get in for some damage. And the attack trigger is good. Treasures, we like treasures. Treasures get you mana immediately, and cube games are pretty quick. You need to deploy your spells quickly. I think there are better Rakdos gold cards if you're just maxing for power level and you don't have like explicit synergies with this. But if you're doing any of the sacrifice artifacts type stuff, this obviously goes really well there. Triggers your Mayhem Devil, all that good stuff. The sack 5 treasures to mind control thing I don't think is going to come up very often. Like, I've played quite a lot with Magda, for example, and I think I've maybe used the sack 5 treasures on that once.
Yeah. But if they're both in the same deck, James.
That is true, yeah. Yeah, maybe if you're like really leaning into the treasure thing, maybe you can get there a bit more often.
Yeah,
but,
like Goldspan Dragon's a real magic card. Like,
yeah. That one's good.
There could be something kind of like enough cards have created treasure tacked onto them nowadays that, again, I don't think we're that far away from that just being a full archetype. Just red-black treasures.
Yeah, for sure. Next up, we have Alpha Deathclaw. It is 4 a black and a green for a 6/6 creature lizard mutant. It has Menace, Trample, and when Alpha Deathclaw enters the battlefield or becomes monstrous, you may destroy target permanent. And it has 4 7 mana, 5 a black and a green, monstrosity 4. So monstrosity is, in fact, if this creature isn't monstrous, put 4+1/+1 counters on it, and it becomes monstrous. This card just impacts the board a lot and is a really big threat. I think it's sort of on that borderline of like, you can cast it, you can reanimate it sort of thing. I actually like it a bit more if you're in the ramping and casting it plan, because then you can obviously get to a monstrosity a bit easier. But yeah, this just does a lot when it enters, and with the trample especially, like, it's a really big threat. They can't trump it anyway because it has menace, and even if they have 2 creatures, they can't really get in the way. And especially if you get to monstrosity this, you're blowing up their thing, and
it's
now a 10/10 menace trample. Like,
that is very big.
They're dead pretty quick. I guess the downside of this is, like, if you cast it and kill their thing and they kill it, like, in a lot of spots you'd rather have just played like a cheap removal spell, right? But this is really high impact. It's like, there are a lot of good 6s.
Yeah,
right. Like, it's competing with Grave Titan and whatnot. I think it's certainly like a really powerful card. It's a really solid option. I don't hate it in really any cube. And it's worth noting as well as any permanent, like, it's obviously at 6 mana, you're not really going to be like getting them off land too often, but killing like a random killing like a high impact enchantment that's on the battlefield is a very nice upside.
Yeah, so that's the thing, because you can also natural order into this, which is not nothing. Like previously, like you would like, this does kind of compare a little bit well to Woodfall Primus. Like Woodfall Primus does have to persist and obviously play with like flash and that kind of stuff, but this is very big.
Yeah, it sure is.
It's just very big. Yeah, no, that's cool.
Undeniably large.
Yeah. I do like the Deathclaw. Well, actually, I like that Deathclaw. Let's see how we like the next one. Next, we have Young Deathclaws. This is 2 black and a green for a 4/2 creature lizard mutant. This one just has menace, but it also has each creature card in your graveyard has scavenge. The scavenge cost is equal to its mana cost. For those who aren't aware, because scavenge, bit of an old mechanic now, you basically can exile a creature card from your graveyard and pay its mana cost, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that card's power on target creature, and you can scavenge only as a sorcery. This is also, again, an uncommon, and it's another very solid creature. So just starting off, 2 toughness is not great. That will die to most red-based removal and a fair amount of blockers, but the 4 power and menace means it's either taking out a real creature with it, or it's taking those 2 small creatures down. The scavenge ability I also do like. It's another way of using your graveyard if you're self-milling. It's letting you either buff up this creature or the rest of your team. This could really see some play in Peasant Cube. Like, I do quite like scavenge. Like, I've seen that ability to give each creature card in your graveyard scavenge. We saw it on Valror's the Scar Striped. That is a rare. This is an uncommon. And actually, this is a bit better as a creature. This one's a 4 mana, 4/2 menace. That was a 3 mana, 2/2. That was also a free sack outlet. So they're different cards. But yeah, in Peasant, I like Young Deathclaws. I think it could see some play.
Yeah, I could see this in Peasant. Like, a lot of what those decks are hurting for is for like high impact 4 and 5 drops, right? And it's not super high impact immediately, but it is a good mana sink. It's nice that it gives you a sort of semi-evasive creature to put the counters on as well. Although in reality, like, the low toughness here does mean you're just still a lot of double blocks are going to be pretty good for your opponent. And obviously it's very vulnerable to removal at just 2 toughness. Yeah, I could imagine it in Peasant Cube being good. I don't think it's a slam dunk.
Well, that's the thing. I'm just looking at what Peasant Cubes have been running recently. And this thing, like, Engolgari, in terms of creatures, they're running things like Baloth Null, which is like a 6 mana 4/5. They return 2 creatures from your graveyard to your hand when it ETBs. Like,
oh, that card was sick in draft.
No, yeah, I agree. Kind of like
yes, I agree.
Like, compared to that, like, I think it's definitely power creep. And I think in those environments, I think this is actually going to be quite strong.
Yeah, I can see it. We do tend to just get a lot of good cards for Peasant in these commander decks, because obviously, like, the rarity doesn't actually matter. It's a commander deck. No one's playing limited with it.
That's definitely something over the last couple of years. Like, a lot of it previously was based on how they were printed in each commander deck. So it used to be the rarity had no relation to the power level of the card. It used to be if a card was printed in only one deck, it was a rare. If it was printed in multiple decks in the same release, it was an uncommon. They have now changed that, quite rightly, to be more like the power level of a card. Specifically for, if I'm honest with you, because of people asking for things for Peasant Cube, kind of like, why can't this be an uncommon, that kind of thing, like, which is cool. We get that. Nice.
Yeah, check that.
But yeah, let's move on to another uncommon now. Next up, we have our first artifact. We have Nuka-Cola Vending Machine. This is 3 generic for an artifact. It has pay 1, tap it, create a food token, and whenever you sacrifice a food, create a tapped treasure token. So this is very slow, but you will make a lot of artifacts with this. In fact, this triggers, no matter how you're sacrificing the food as well, means I'm sure it can do cool things like KCI. You're going to be generating mana that way. So yeah, you tap it, create a food token. You sack that to KCI, make some mana, then make a treasure, make more mana, feed the organ grinder, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I do think this is slow, but just it will spew you out a lot of artifact tokens over the course of the game. If you're in a deck, or if you have a deck in your cube that wants a lot of artifact tokens, then I could see this being played. Like it's definitely not as good as Retrofitter Foundry, but it is going to be a hell of a lot cheaper than Retrofitter Foundry. So if you're in a more budget environment, then it's definitely something I can kind of bridge that gap in terms of just being a mana sink to spew out artifact tokens, basically.
Yeah, I think to me this looks like one of those cards where if you do all the work and have all the synergies, you can make this like an acceptable card, you know? Because it does nothing on its own as a thing, right? Because you don't...
it makes a food.
Well, it's because you don't get the treasures until you sack the food, and often it's like you don't sack the food unless you're either immediately dead or don't have anything else to do. And getting the 1 treasure back is not really enough to change that, because you paid 1 to make the food, 2 to sack the food. You're in 3 mana to get 1 treasure, and you can only do it once a turn because it's a tap ability. So yeah, I think really you'd have to be sacking the food to other stuff and have a proactive plan. Like, and KCI is a good use case. But even there, like, there are probably better enablers, you know? You look at compare this to something like Tireless Version or Tireless Tracker, those cards, like,
yeah,
that's so much higher
power
power
level.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, there's a lot of stuff that spews out artifacts. I don't know, but we have to be playing this one.
No, that's true. Yeah, it's things more and more decks want, but we're not as desperate for it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next up we have the Pip-Boy 3000. This is 1 mana for a artifact equipment. It has equip 2, and whenever equipped creature attacks, choose 1. You can sort inventory to draw a card, then discard a card. You can pick a perk to put a +1/+1 counter on that creature, or you can check map to untap up to 2 target lands. I actually recognize this from the games. We're finally there.
It's taken an hour and a half.
It's taken a while, yeah.
We're good.
This card's, so listen, it's 1 mana equipment is nice because, like, you can saga for it, and this has a lot of flexibility. Having said that, the modes are just kind of a bit low power. You're not getting that far ahead on any of them. And it's not even uncommon. Like, I know this isn't really a great comparison because it's a busted card, but you compare this to Umezawa Jitte, and it doesn't look good for this card. I will say that.
So most cards don't look good against Jitte. Like, I was thinking more just like Shadow Spear.
Sure, but the thing Shadow Spear does really well is the lifelink, right? And like just housing aggressive decks, and the like as a saga combo is actually really good with Shadow Spear because you by definition have big creatures that you want to give lifelink and trample to.
That's fair. Yeah.
Like the flexibility is nice, but it's just 2 to equip. You're not going to be able to move it around that much. I'd be really into it if it was 1 to equip, but I guess it's nice that with getting to untap 2 lands, you can kind of get an equip for free, even if you don't get anything much out of it that turn. But yeah, I think this doesn't quite make the cut for me.
Yeah, it's tricky because like in theory, this could go in such a large number of decks, but it's just whether it's impactful enough in any of them. Like, technically, if you're in like a tempo-y deck, the draw a card, discard a card, build your own Merfolk Looter on an invasive creature, that's fine. Then putting a counter on a creature, like any kind of deck that's attacking, in theory, what's that? Any kind of aggressive deck is fine for that. They're not excited about the mana value you have to, or the mana cost you have to put into it, but it would be fine with that. And then untapping 2 lands, like, yes, it can untap like a Gaia's Cradle, the Tolarian Academy, or even just like a deck with like a bounce land, so you can generate mana that way. So I think it's like the 24th card in like 3 or 4 different decks, which I think is the tricky part of this. Like, it's very close to being playable in a lot of decks, but I don't think I can't think any of those decks actively are. I can't see any of the decks I just mentioned picking this early and being excited by it and playing it.
Yeah,
that's kind of the issue. I think it's a cool card, and like, yeah, flavor-wise nails it, like nails the Pip-Boy from Fallout. But yeah, I think it struggles to get in. Like I could like there could be a world where I just test this because the base level is like, yeah, it is. Maybe if it's the 23rd card in enough decks, then it does get in. Like, there could be a world where I put this in my cube and it is in every deck that drafts it. There's also a world where it's not in any deck that ever drafts it, and I think that's the line with this card that we kind of need to find.
Yeah, I think for me, when you build cube, I always want like all the cards to have upside. Like,
yeah,
I want every card to like have a deck that is excited to play it, not just like it's aspiring to be okay, you know?
Is Academy then? Is that the highest upside of this? You put this in your Tolarian Academy deck, you put it on your construct token, you swing with it, you get 2 activations a turn. Like, that's technically high upside. Is that enough? Or is that just too difficult with this card?
Wait, how do I get 2 activations a turn?
Untap up to 2 target lands. You tap your turn.
Oh, I get 2 I get 2 academies.
Yeah,
Yeah. But like, why am I doing all this work? I could just get a Candelabra.
Yeah, fair.
I don't need like a creature as well.
Yeah. As I said, Candelabra is much higher on the pick order. Like, there's like,
sure.
Like, the argument is not, is it like like first or second pick? It's more, is it 23rd or 24th pick?
Sure. Yeah.
Those decks. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, tricky one. I think. Like, I don't know. I know. Like time will tell. Like, do let us know in the comments or online and stuff what you think about Pip-Boy 3000, because it is obviously a very iconic card in the world of Fallout. Has it made it into Magic well enough for you? Do let us know. Because it's time for us to move on to our last artifact. We have Silver Shroud Costume. It is 2 generic for a artifact equipment. It has flash, and when it enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains Shroud until end of turn. Equipped creature can't be blocked, and it has a regular equip cost of 3. So I kind of like this card. It can be played proactively if you're trying to force damage through. If your opponent has the removal spell, yes, it sucks, but you still get to equip this later to a creature and force damage through another way. Also, like, if they're a black deck and you've seen removals and you've seen removal from them, you can use this. You can hold this up as a way of protecting your creature, because then you can flash, give it Shroud, which means it'll fizzle the removal spell. I don't think this goes like so. I think this is probably best in more mid-rangey decks that are trying to force through like a big creature rather than like trying to force through damage from a big creature and also protect a big creature, rather than like any kind of like, you're not putting this on a 2-drop, you're putting this on like a 4 or 5-drop and hitting for 4 or 5. That's kind of where I see that. And also a deck that has its own instant speed interaction, so that it's not obvious like you're doing this, or like if like you're either holding up a removal spell or a counter spell and this as well to protect your creature. That's kind of where I think this could be best. In those kind of builds, I think it's perfectly fine. Like, yeah, 2 mana to protect your creature and make it unblockable. Like, that will win games. Like, I know, stick it on, something big and dumb, and you will be able to win games with it. I think it'll be all right in those decks.
The issue I have with it is that I feel like the only time you're feeling really happy with this spell is when you do get to blow out a removal spell, right? Because if you just run it out there and without getting a card out of it initially, then it just feels kind of low impact, and then it gives no stat boost, and then if they kill the creature, you're just down a card. And you're not down a card because you can re-equip this, but it's really expensive to re-equip it free. You're not going to be doing that a ton. And as a protection spell, you compare this to like some of the protection tricks, like the 1 mana green one that like puts a roll thing on something and gives it hexproof until end of turn. Like that's 1 mana and it gives you a stat boost that turn. It gives you the +1/+1 for definitely like that. That just seems like a way more efficient way of getting this effect, because that you can also trade for a card by winning a combat, right? But this doesn't give any stats at all. Makes it like a little bit weak. I guess maybe the upside is it gives them like a protection spell to colors that wouldn't normally have it, but it just seems like not a great one to me.
No, I think that's fair. Like, there are definitely cube environments that revolve more around combat matters, and in those, maybe this could see play as just another kind of trick that is colorless, so it can go in any deck. Like that's maybe where this sees play more than just like a regular style of cube. But
I guess the environment's very much about like blocking and board stalls and stuff. Then maybe there's some blockable equipment, even if it is expensive to re-equip, is just good because you can keep moving it around, and hopefully you got a removal spell out of it first time round. I could kind of buy that. I think I'd be way more into it if it was like, when it equips, it gives Shroud and +1/+1 even until end of turn, right? And you can at least potentially use it to win a combat. Because it's going to feel, I think, pretty bad when you're just running this out pre-combat and jamming unblockable. Unless you're killing them really quickly, it's just going to be like, I killed your creature, and now you've got to spend all this mana to equip,
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Makes sense. There is one last set of cards I want to touch on. They have completed a cycle of lands. They have completed the filter lands that we originally saw back in Odyssey. So originally we had the allied cycle in Odyssey. Here we have the enemy cycle of filter lands printed in this Fallout set. So that is Desolate Mire, Ferris Lake, Overflowing Basin, Sunscorched Divide, and Verdicent Bog. I'll read the white-black one first. So it's a land that has A1 generic, tap, and add white and black. So they've completed the cycle. So we have the white and black one, we have the Izzet one, we have the Simic one, we have the Boris one, and we have the Golgari ones. These don't really see much cube play, but thought it was worth mentioning just because they are relatively budget most of the time. Like the rest of the cycle is very, very cheap. You generally see them reprinted in Commander decks. I would imagine we will see these reprinted in Commander decks. They are budget lands. If you're building a budget environment, these might be a solid way of... you can now complete the cycle of these, basically.
For sure, these are not bad lands at all. If you're in, obviously there are better lands available, but these are like, I would take these are much better than just like a regular Guildgate, in my opinion. Getting more untapped jewels is always a good thing. Be careful with them. Like, there's a couple of ways you can kind of get got by these lands. Firstly, if all 10 of these are in your cube, be careful about putting a bunch of them in the same deck, because if your opening hand is like 2 of these lands, neither of them tap for mana, you cannot make any mana with 2 of these lands.
That's not great.
Yeah. And also considerations about like how you leave up your mana if you're tapping some of your mana and leaving some of it up. If you've played with signets, you know how to play with them. They're basically signet lands. But just be careful about you can't spend individual mana, like 2 sets of 1 mana at different times. If you have a different land than this, you have to spend both of it at the same time. And like if you have a mountain and Desolate Mire, for example, which is the white-black one, you can't cast a 1 and a red 2-drop because you have to tap your mountain to pay for Desolate Mire and you don't have red mana.
All right, so that's going to do it for the set review. Kind of with the larger sets that we do, we normally do like a top 5 cards from the set. But as this set is a little smaller, I think we're just going to just touch on like our favorite card from the set or cards we're thinking of testing. So James, in your kind of powered cube, are there any cards that stand out to you as things that you want to test?
Yeah, obviously, like Powered Cube, it's kind of harder to get in. I think the one I'm kind of interested in testing is Nuclear Fallout, the sweeper. I think there's currently Deluge and Damnation in. There might actually not be Damnation. Obviously, this is worse than Deluge, but I might try this over Damnation. I'm not like convinced it's better than Damnation, but it's kind of an interesting card to me. And it looks pretty fun to play with. So I might give it a try for a couple of cubes and see how it plays. I also would really like to put Veronica in, the one that like triggers off discard. But I was looking at my red 3-drops, and it's a lot worse than all of them, so I can't.
No, definitely. No, that's fair. Yeah, that one and some of the other madness stuff is something I'll be looking at in the future. Like from my end, I've already like picked up a copy of Assault Tron Dominator. I'm going to be giving that a go. Actually, from the conversation we've had, I think I might give the big Deathclaws a go, like Alpha Deathclaw. It is just, it's big, it's cool, it's Golgari, it's kind of what I like. So
yeah. No, I respect it.
I can see myself giving it a go. Yeah, it is just very, very big, and it will kill people. So I'm kind of up for it.
Be honest, how many Golgari gold cards are currently in your cube?
I think it's only one more than every other.
Okay, that's quite restrained. I expected that to be more.
It is 12, but I'm including Mosswood Dread Knight in that, which is sort of a green card.
Sure.
Awesome. Right, so that's going to do it for our set review. Before we get you out of here, we have our final topic of the day. We're going to be talking about what have we been playing recently. James, do you want to go first? You've actually, from the sound of it, been playing a fair bit of Magic recently. What have you been up to?
Mostly jamming some Merses of Markov mana draft still. I really like the format. I think Vintage Cube is up today, maybe, of time for recording. So I'll probably move back to that for some online drafts. But I've really enjoyed Murders. It's been a really fun format. Outside of that, I played a little bit of Pioneer on MitGo, trying to see if I could get Magma Opus creativity to work. It's really quite bad. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a ton of fun, but there are better decks you could play as at Phoenix. How about you? What have you been playing?
So I've actually played very, very little Magic recently. For those keeping track of the content on the channel, you might have noticed it's definitely slowed the last month or so. That's because I actually had surgery like about 6 weeks ago, and I've been kind of recovering from that for the bulk of it, which meant that I've only played Magic once in the last like 6 weeks, 2 months. That was last weekend. So what I spent the time doing when I was recovering from surgery was building something that I've been thinking about for a while. I built my own mystery booster, but cube, I guess is the right word for it. Basically, it's about 2,000 cards, but balanced so that it drafts like a normal set, like a mystery booster set. Kind of like it had collated packs, all that kind of stuff. That was kind of the project I gave for myself. I'm going to do like a proper breakdown for it on the channel at some point in the future. But yeah, like it was generally like it definitely kept my mind occupied while I couldn't do anything for 2 weeks. Because basically, yeah, I had 2,000 slots to fill. Firstly, asked the playgroup for their suggestions of cards. Got a load of cool like draft commons and uncommons from past. Put them all together. Then went through like budget cubes and like pauper cubes and peasant cubes to find some other ideas. Then put a load of old cards that I liked in, and then put it all together. And like, yeah, like so the one game of Magic I've actually played in the last couple of weeks was when we drafted that last week, and I thought it actually turned out pretty well. Like your deck looked quite sweet. What did you end up with when we drafted it?
Yeah, no, that was a ton of fun. So I had a like blue-black interactive deck with a ton of recursion and graveyard stuff. I first picked Hidetsugu and Kairi, which seems very busted in that format. That card I could have done with drawing it more, but that was the only criticism I would have of it. Got to do some fun. Got to go off with, I don't know if you know the card Containment Construct from Kaladesh.
Yeah.
That card's really sweet. 2 mana, 2/1, but lets you cast stuff that you discard. That play a Merfolk Looter into that, and you are going to town. But no, I thought the format played great. Actually, it was like it felt a bit like Chaos Draft, but actually, like you could get a bit more synergies going because there were some synergies seeded in. It felt like there was a sacrifice deck there if you wanted it. There's some good graveyard stuff going on. Yeah, I thought this format seemed really cool. Actually,
yeah, it's definitely something I want to get do more of in the future. And like the best thing, like so, I ended up in like a Borisy aggro kind of deck, and the thing I did that definitely won games was like turn 5 Shadowfax, attack with Shadowfax, and put into play a Dragon-style Twins, which is the 3/3 with double strike and prowess. That definitely won me a couple of games. That was quite good fun. But yeah,
that'll do it.
Like it. I just think it's a very nice power level. So like, I will do something going into it in more detail in the future. But kind of like, I think the best way to sum up is like it's good like pub Magic. Kind of like we were playing like everything's unsleeved as well. Kind of like the value of the cards is quite low because we are playing unsleeved. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it seems like a really cool thing to put together as well, just for anyone if you have a play group that can meet and play regularly. Like, 'cause it's also like pretty cheap to put something like that together if you want, right? Like, I don't know if other people are like me, I still have like a random shoebox full of draft chaff somewhere, and it's like you could kind of just make one out of that and then add cool cards that you have, right? Like, you don't have to go and buy a bunch of cards like you would have to if you were building a cube. It seems like a really good way to do it.
Oh, exactly. Well, so I did buy some cards, right? But the average price of the card I bought was like 5p.
Yeah.
I think I bought
sense.
I think I did one order that was like 40 quid, something like that, and bought like 400 cards.
Nice.
And I only had to do that because I recently, in the last 6 months, cleared out all my chaff boxes.
Oh, that was a poor decision.
It was a terrible decision. Like it's just like having to go out and buy another copy of like Bacon to a Pie. It's like, oh, really? Am I doing this? But yeah.
Honestly, with stuff like that, I basically throw it out at this point because it's like I feel like the equity of having to keep this boxes and boxes of old magic cards that I'm not going to use. And then the time to search through those huge boxes of magic cards to find the Bacon to the Pie. I'd rather spend 5p on the Bacon to the Pie, you know?
No, definitely 100%. Time is definitely worth something. But I think that's a good point as any to leave it for today. Yeah, James, pleasure. Thank you as always. Some cool cards from Fallout for us to talk about today.
Yeah, no, always a pleasure. I think the current Wizards plan seems to be to increase releases until every episode is a set review. We're getting there.
I guarantee the next episode will not be a set review. It'll be something about Q probably, but it'll be something cool. But
strong. But yeah, no, always enjoy them anyway.
No, awesome. Well, thank you, dude. Well, just leaves me to thank you all out there. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. Do make sure you like, share, tell a friend. That's always a good one. But until next time, it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from James, and we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.